Good morning and welcome to Welton Baptist Church. It's so good that you are with us here this morning. It's fantastic that despite all the things going on which could stop us from joining together to worship our incredible God, we can still be doing this together. Today we're going to be jumping into God's Word, we're going to be worshipping together, we're going to be praying together. Let's really go for it in this time.
You have my heart, and I will search for yours. Jesus, take my life and lead me on. Lord, you have my heart, I will search for yours. Let me be to you a sacrifice, and I will praise you. Jesus, take my life and lead me on. Lord, you have my heart, and I will search for yours. Let me be to you a sacrifice.
Good morning, Welton Church family. This morning I'm pleased to be continuing our series Reunion, where we're going to continue our exploration of the gospel by looking at what I think is the ground or the foundation of the gospel. Are you ready? Here it is. Jesus is God with us. You know, I think if we can fully get our heads around what that means for us, for everyone, then I think we'll all agree that this is the foundation of the gospel. Now remember, when I'm saying gospel, I'm talking about good news. News that is good. You know, for so often the church has presented a distorted and twisted version of the message of Jesus. And to be honest, to most people, it sounds nothing like good news. In fact, the only people that think it is good news are often the people who consider themselves to be in. You know, to everyone else, the news we've heard about Jesus has not been that good. Maybe it's not even been news. Maybe it's been more like, good advice, like a big agony aunt in the sky. We've got some good advice, a list of do's and don'ts that our destination will be determined by how many of the do's you manage to do and how many of the don'ts you manage to avoid. Again, that's not good news. The good news of Jesus is good news for everyone. People who don't yet know Jesus, and even those of us who have been Christians for a while, it's still good news. It's still music to our ears, warmth to our bones. We as Christians often need to hear the gospel again and again as well. At the start of Matthew, we read this about the birth of Jesus. After the angel prophesied that he will be named Jesus because he will save his people from their sins, it says this: "All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel," which means God with us. So, Emmanuel, God with us, means that God came down in human form, yes, but it also means so much more than that. You know, the primary context of the prophecy, which comes from the book of Isaiah that the angel's referring to here, is a situation when a king was afraid that his enemy was going to win the battle, and that God was actually on his enemy's side and was going to use the enemy to punish him. And so he was tempted to make some kind of unholy alliance with some pagan nation to help support him so that they wouldn't lose the battle. And Isaiah, as a prophet, comes to the king and says, "No, God is with you." And so Emmanuel, God with us, doesn't just mean that God is present, always watching like a big CCTV in the sky ready to catch you out, because actually if that's what he's doing, if he's present but as your judge, well, that's not good news. But if it's that God is with you, that he's not against you, he's on your side, not your enemy's side, if he's here to keep you safe and secure from the harm that your enemies are going to do, well, if God's not just with you but for you, then that is good news. You don't need to be reaching out to other alliances in order to be safe. God is really with you. He really is for you. And this is what we want to communicate when we say that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. In the ancient world, in a desire to be in control of things that we have no control over, our ancestors came up with the idea of all these external forces being responsible for things like the weather or crops or the sun, things that they had no control over. And so they came up with these gods. And then in an attempt to maintain ever-growing crops and to have just the right amount of rain and sun when it was needed, our ancestors performed rituals to keep the gods happy. And sometimes they would perform a ritual or a sacrifice to the rain god, and it would rain. Result. But then the next time they would perform the same sacrifice and it wouldn't rain. And so they thought, maybe that they've not given enough, or maybe I've upset the rain god, and so they would up the ante. And this continued to spiral further and further and further out of control until we get to a point in history where people are harming themselves and sacrificing their own children to keep the gods happy, because the underlying belief was that the gods were mad at you and that you needed to appease them. And before you start thinking, stupid primitive people, let me remind you that things haven't changed that much. Touch wood, they haven't changed that much. Salt over my shoulder, they haven't changed that much. Don't walk underneath that ladder, they haven't changed that much. Find a penny, pick it up, and all day you'll have good something or other. It hasn't changed. Better make sure I read my Bible. Things haven't changed that much. Don't put your shoes on the counter. Actually, I think that's just a cleanliness thing. Make sure I don't sin today. Things haven't changed that much. There's still something deep within us that thinks that God is against us, and so we better do something about it. I don't know if you remember, some of you, back in 2008 there was this atheist bus campaign, and all over London and other cities around the world there was a sign that a group of atheists put on buses, and it said this: there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. Now I think that the second part of that statement, the second line, is more interesting. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life, because that is predicated on the belief that if there is a God, then that is something we should be worrying about. In other words, if there is a God, then we're screwed. Because as we all know from religion, God is judgmental, he's mean-spirited, he's violent, and he loves nothing more than to throw people into hell, and you're likely one of them. And the idea of a God being so against us rather than for us has been spouted out by religious people, including Christians, that a preferable antidote for dealing with the anxiety of death is actually atheism. It's to say, I can live in a much better universe than that, thank you very much. It's a universe where God just doesn't exist. But of course, all of that is predicated on a God that is against you rather than for you. And that's not true. The whole story of the Bible is that God is trying to tell his people that he's not like that. He's nothing like those ancient gods. He's trying to tell his people, his creation, his humanity, that he doesn't want sacrifices. He actually wants to be close. God is trying to give this message to his people that God is with you and for you. He is close and compassionate. He's not distant or detached, and the best way he demonstrates this is through his Son, Jesus. Jesus is God with us. Jesus is God for us. If we want to get the best possible idea of what God is like, we need to look at Jesus. Jesus said himself in John 14, "If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. If you see Jesus, you're seeing God." Jesus goes on to say this: "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." So when we look at Jesus, what do we see? Well, we see someone who doesn't come to judge. He says that himself in John 3, 16 and 17, that he's come not to judge the world, not to condemn the world, but to save the world. Jesus is someone who comes full of forgiveness and embrace. He challenges the religious institution of his days, religious hypocrisy, but he embraces sinners. He parties with them and he invites them into his world as he joins them in their world. he shows us that God is really for us and not against us. So, how does this change how we act, how we think, how we feel? You can see how this would have been a revolution to the people in the ancient world, but what does this mean for us here and now? Well, we looked at what was said about Jesus in the very first chapter in Matthew. You know, Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. And just to emphasize the point, Jesus in the very last chapter of the same book says to his followers, "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Jesus says, "I'm always with you to the very end of the age. I'm always for you to the very end of the age." For a lot of you, you know, you struggle with this. For a lot of you, you're stuck in that kind of ancient world way of thinking that if I could just do enough, if I could just knock on wood enough times, if I could just sacrifice enough, if I could just worship harder or serve more, if I hadn't have done that thing last weekend, then God would be with me and for me. Well, here's what you need to know. There is nothing you can do to lose God's presence, no matter what you feel, no matter what you're going through. That doesn't change who God is. That doesn't dictate his presence in your life. God is with you, and God is for you always. There is nothing we did to earn this, and there is nothing we can do to lose this. Jesus is Emmanuel, no matter what you did or what you've done. He's trying to say, I'm not like those other gods. I'm not like these other systems you've built your head around. I'm not these anxious feelings you're feeling where you feel like you have to do something in order to earn my presence, in order for me to be with you. Jesus is Emmanuel, no matter what you've done. He is with you. He is for you. How different would your life be if you trusted this? What would it look like in your life if you started to accept the truth that God is not distant or detached, but he is close and compassionate. He is with you and he is for you. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you that you are God with us. And not just that you are God for us. Would you help the reality of that sink into every area of our lives? And Lord, where there might be bits of us that still feel we have to do the right things or say the right things to keep you on our side, Jesus, would you show us? And then would you quench those bits with your loving kindness so that we are no longer motivated or ruled by fear, but instead motivated in the secure knowledge that we are loved unconditionally by a God who is with us and for us. Amen.
Thanks for being with us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed it and you've really got hold of something from God. If you'd like to know more about the church, anything at all, whether it's house groups, children's work, anything, please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. God bless.